The Philips OLED+936 is equipped with the latest, more efficient OLED panel from LG Display, similar to the one implemented on the LG G1 with OLED EVO technology. This allowed the Philips 936 to achieve higher full-field brightness than conventional OLEDs, coming in at 180 nits on our review unit, which is actually the brightest we've measured among 2021 OLED televisions. Peak brightness on a 10% window measured 720 nits after calibration to D65 white point, which wasn't that much brighter than the step-down 806. But with OLED's pixel-level light control and a slightly more relaxed ABL or automatic brightness limiter circuitry, courtesy of the more efficient OLED panel, HDR presentation generally appeared polished and refined on the Philips 936. The television supports TV-led Dolby Vision, but the default brightness value of 50 in the most accurate Dolby Vision Dark Picture mode crushed some shadow detail, which could be rectified by some adjustments to the brightness setting. Another problem with the Dolby Vision presentation was an overly bright PQ EOTF tracking, causing Dolby Vision content to appear a tad washed out with more compression of bright highlight detail, and unfortunately even making big adjustments to the gamma setting didn't help, and the Philips Autocal workflow in Chrominance didn't allow for any Dolby Vision calibration to correct this issue. Talking of which, a beta version of Chrominance has finally unlocked Autocal for compatible Philips televisions, including the OLED+936. Bear in mind that the Autocal implementation by Philips merely automates the manual calibration process instead of creating a 3D LUT like what happens on LG OLEDs, so for the best results, we still prefer to calibrate the OLED+936 manually. SDR color accuracy was excellent after calibration, with an average delta error of below 1, and no inaccuracies exceeding the humanly perceptible threshold of delta error 3 on this challenging color checker SG chart where 140 patches were measured. Needless to say, general colors including skin tones looked accurate and natural across a wide variety of SDR or standard dynamic range content we sampled on the Philips 936. In terms of HDR colors, DCI-P3 color gamut coverage came in at 99% UV, while Right-to-3D coverage was 74%. With motion styles set to pure cinema, the Philips 936 applied 5.5 pull-down to present 24 frames per second movies correctly without telescenic judder. For those of you who are sensitive to the mild stutter that is inherent in 24p films, you can set motion styles to movie to achieve smoother motion. Although, of course, for videophiles like me, this would still introduce Sons of Opera effect or SOE, however slight. With motion styles disabled, motion resolution came in at the sample and hold baseline of 300 lines, and typical of TVs using a MediaTek HDMI 2.1 SoC, there's some artifacting around the 170 level. Engaging motion styles would increase motion resolution to the traditional OLED ceiling of 650 lines, and selecting motion styles personal would let you adjust perfect natural motion and perfect clear motion in 10-step increments, similar to the dejudder and deblur controls on rival televisions. There is also a new for 2021 fast motion clarity setting, which activates 120Hz black frame insertion or BFI, boosting motion resolution to 1080 lines or higher without incurring significant flicker or brightness drop for SDR content. In HDR mode, engaging fast motion clarity would cut peak brightness by a few hundred nits, with a corresponding darkening of the PQ EOTF tracking, so we would advise against using fast motion clarity when watching HDR content on the Philips 936. Among OLED brands, Philips TV is arguably the most accomplished at handling 50Hz content, thanks to the company's European roots, and we didn't spot any frame skipping or microstutter across a wide variety of broadcast programs we watched on the OLED+936, even with motion interpolation enabled. Upscaling was decent if a bit on the aggressive side, leading to more overshoot artifacts as well as some fizziness along high contrast edges in heavily compressed broadcast material. Jaggies in video-based interlaced content were suppressed fairly effectively, with some jagged edges showing on the third bouncing bar in this HQV benchmark test pattern. Despite not offering a film mode setting in the user menu, the Philips OLED+936 correctly detected and processed 3.2 and 2.2 cadences in film-based interlaced material. Full chroma bandwidth could be obtained by engaging monitor mode according to this 1080p test pattern from the Spears and Munsell HD benchmark disc. Native 10-bit gradation wasn't the smoothest we've seen among 2021 OLED televisions, with some polarization visible along the skies of the Martian. Because the Philips OLED+936 doesn't provide a dedicated decontouring filter in the picture menu, you can use the MPEG artifact reduction setting to reduce the polarization. But we found any improvement to be subtle even on the maximum setting, which unfortunately would also soften fine detail in the picture since MPEG artifact reduction is a spatial filter. Another area where the OLED+936 could do with some additional attention from Philips engineers is the suppression of near-black chrominance overshoot. We saw more flashing artifacts than on rival OLEDs from A brands, both on test patterns as well as in bit-starved content, such as this heavily compressed broadcast footage from the final season of Game of Thrones. The overshoot would occasionally also manifest as glowing contours in panning shots, sometimes even affecting certain low-light scenes in high bitrate 4K Blu-ray movies. Bright uniformity was excellent on our 55-inch review unit, with no sign of bending, dirty screen effect or color tinting on full-field gray slides, and we didn't spot any significant Venetian blind effect in bright HDR scenes either. Dark uniformity was par for the course for a 2021 OLED panel, with some thin vertical streaks and mild vignetting along the sides, which didn't bother us in real-world viewing. With game mode or monitor mode engaged, input lag measured 18 milliseconds at 60 frames per second, halving to 9 milliseconds at 120 frames per second. Two HDMI 2.1 ports are available, namely HDMI 1 and HDMI 2, each supporting the full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth of 48 gigabits per second, as well as AMD Freesync Premium and HDMI Forum VRR, which delivered smooth gameplay without stuttering or tearing artifacts. Although from time to time you may see VRR flicker at low frame rates in dark game sequences, which is an LG display panel issue that affects all pre-2022 OLED televisions regardless of the brand. According to the Xbox information screen, the television can support 4K 120Hz gameplay in HDR10, but Dolby Vision gaming is only limited to 4K 60Hz. Ironically, because of the addition of a coprocessor to the MediaTek MT5895 SoC, which together constitutes the 5th Gen P5 with AI Intelligent Dual Picture Engine, that's a mouthful, the OLED+936 actually couldn't resolve full 4K 120Hz resolution even in monitor mode with HDMI Ultra HD set to optimal, unlike what the step-down Philips 806 could do, making the 936 unsuitable for PC use. Native 10-bit gradation at 4K 120Hz also seemed to be slightly worse on the 936, which exhibited a bit more polarization not only on this display HDR test pattern, but also in actual games such as Microsoft Flight Simulator on the Xbox Series X. On the plus side, HDRG was well implemented with the appropriate HDR perfect setting, providing a hard clip at 750 nits for both maximum tone map luminance and maximum full frame tone map luminance based on the Xbox HDR calibration screens. Just make sure you change light boost to maximum from the default setting of medium in HDR game mode, and also remember to turn off light sensor to obtain the highest peak brightness that the TV is capable of when playing HDR games. To reduce the risk of OLED burn-in, the Philips 936 features a Screensaver Mode containing a floating Bowers Wilkins logo which moves faster than an Aldi cashier at checkout, as well as undefeatable pixel shifting, in case owners are wondering why one side of the bezel looks slightly thicker than the other. On top of these measures, the OLED+936 is meant to be equipped with the most advanced logo detection dimming, whose algorithm is controlled by the local image protection setting in the user menu. But we found the high setting to be not very precise, with more overspill outside the target area than my hangover piss at 3 AM, so we would just use the less aggressive normal setting if you would like to take advantage of this feature. Last but not least, Let's talk about two exclusive features that make the Philips 936 worth buying over other flagship OLED televisions. This video is sponsored by Box, the online technology store. Visit box.co.uk for the best deals on TVs, soundbars, and all your other technology needs. One is Ambilight, Philips' patented integrated bias lighting solution, which is effective in reducing eye fatigue when used correctly to project D65 white behind the television. Just make sure you dial down the brightness value to avoid drowning out shadow detail, especially in HDR. The other big selling point of the OLED+936 is naturally the Bowers Wilkins speaker bar, which sounded even more nuanced yet authoritative than the one on last year's OLED+935. Among 2021 televisions, this is as close as you can get to hi-fi sound from a television, barring Philips' own OLED+986 with an even more elaborate speaker system, of course. Let's sum up. Philips seemed to be experiencing some teething problems in assimilating the MediaTek HDMI 2.1 SoC, resulting in worse gradation and less effective suppression of near-black Chrominance overshoot than last year's OLED+935. Compared to the step-down 806, the Philips 936 also had slightly higher input lag and failed to resolve full 4K 120Hz resolution, with the culprit ironically being the extra coprocessor which is meant to improve picture quality elsewhere. At the end of the day, however, all flagship TVs have their own strengths and weaknesses, and considering its accurate colors after calibration, the highest full-screen HDR brightness among 2021 OLED TVs, class-leading 50Hz motion and sound quality, not to mention unique Ambilight technology not available on rival television brands, the Philips 936 earns our highly recommended award. To find out how the Philips 936 fared against other flagship OLEDs in our annual TV shootout event, please click here for our results video.